Hey everyone, I'm the ThePaleOrc. I'm going to be going over my build for PvP. It's a stamina DK, it's mainly for 1vxing, 1 vs 1 situations, small scale. It can be manipulated for large scale, which is 12 to 24 players. First off, my gear, my chest, belt, shoes, pants, and gloves are 5-piece black rose. You're going to want to do this with any build, as far as if you're sword and board or dual wield, because you get 5-piece of one, 5-piece of another with your jewelry. So you go 5, 5, and 2 with your monsters. So 5-piece black rose, all Inpen. Gear does not have to be yellow. Purple's fine. 2-piece Tremor Scale. I have a heavy helmet, and then Mundus medium. Currently running 6 heavy and 1 medium. A lot of people like 5, 1, and 1 for the additional resources. I feel it's situational. I prefer 6 heavy because of the buff from the black rose. If you look at the Constitution passive from the heavy armor, you're getting 1562 each hit of magic and stamina every 4 seconds. That drops each additional piece of heavy you have. Alright, let's go to my jewelry. I have 3-piece Viper on my jewelry, 2 stamina regen, 1 weapon damage, sturdy on my Viper shield, sharpened on my 1H, also sharpened on my 2H. A lot of people will argue that defending is better on your off bar, but if you have a dot on your off bar, like me, Venomous Claw, Rearming Trap, your dot is going to hit like a wet noodle. In other words, it's going to be very low penetration if you have defending. Yeah, you'll be tankier, but your dots will be inferior. Alright. Another thing is the poisons. Well, poisons on both bars. Your main bar, your Magica poison, which is both Magica and Stamina for 6.4 seconds, draining your opponent's resources. On your back bar, you want an extra additional dot poison, including the Magic and Stamina resource Siphon. I mean, I do have, if I take this off, I have a weapon damage glyph, but this is not a weapon damage build. This is a proc build. You don't need anything more than 2200 weapon damage, believe it or not, with this build. You still hit very hard. I mean, the only people you're not going to be able to burst down, obviously, is the Blazing Shield Templars with like 70,000 HP. Alright, so this is my unbuff stats. My 2H. My food actually just ran out. Let's pop that food back on. I also run the max health and stamina. I don't run tri-food. I'm running for the extra HP and the extra maximum stamina. I feel like it really complements the DK the best. Alright, unbuffed, I got 1950 weapon damage, 44% crit, about 20k spell resist, and about 17,000 physical resist, and just shy about 2300 crit resist. This is unbuffed with my 2H bar. This is the most vulnerable my build can get. I got my 38k, just about 39k stamina, about 10k magicka, and about 27,000 HP. Now, if I hit my buffs with my sword and board bar, now look, 28k spell resist, 25,000 physical resist, which is it's very tanky. You have 40,000 stamina. Just about 2200 weapon damage. I mean, if you look at the Viper proc, it's 8200, and then Tremor Scale procs about 8100. There's also an AoE and a snare, which is very powerful. It procs all at once every 4 seconds. Also, it's kind of nice because the Black Rose also procs every 4 seconds. Has a cooldown with the Constitution passive. The cooldown on the magic poisons, it's about 10 seconds, but you could proc both. So you could proc one in 10 seconds, and say by the time the one cools down, the other one, you proc the other one. It's constant pressure on your opponent. My Mundus also is the Thief. This is for the extra crit. The problem with heavy armor builds is they have very low crit. Great sustain, decent damage now with the proc sets, but the problem is, if you have 30% crit on your heavy armor build, you're not going to hit hard at all. And your heals are going to be very low. So what you want to do is you want to run the Thief. You want to have at least over 40% crit, weapon crit, on your bar. So let's go over the skills. On my sword and board, I have Invasion. This is a great ability. This is your gap closer. This is going to help you 1vx and bring your targets down. If a target has no stamina and you hit them with Invasion, this 88 increased longer stun time is pretty much an execute at that point. They're not getting up. They are going down. Alright, you got the Ransack. I mean, you could run Pierce Armor if you want, but I prefer Ransack for the extra resistance. This is the bread and butter for your build. What you're going to do is you're going to want to weave a heavy attack, and just about at the right point, you hit your Puncture or your Ransack, and you cancel the animation, and you weave in a heavy attack with your Pierce Armor. Alright, then you got your Igneous Shield. This is also the bread and butter to this build. That gives you your major heals. A lot of people, what happens is when they're 1vxing or they're pressured on multiple targets hitting them at once, they're not paying attention to their heals, and that is the most important thing when you are in pressured situations, when you're outnumbered or 1vxing, whatever the case may be. So what you're going to do is you're going to pop your Igneous and then your Vigor right after it. Like, for example, if I pop my Igneous and then I check my tooltip, it's almost 18k, the tooltip on the Vigor, which is a huge heal. Alright, now the Reverberating Bash. This is a great stun, and also puts Major Defile on your target that stops them from healing. So if you have a very bursty healy, Templar, what you do is you do the same thing you do with Puncture. You do a heavy attack with a Reverberating Bash, canceling the animation. And it guarantees you a 100% chance on hitting your target with a heavy attack, which is implying the poison and that you stun them and they don't dodge it with Shuffle. Another little trick is I have Werewolf on my sword and board bar. I mentioned before, this is not a regen build. However, when you're 1vxing and you're roll dodging a lot, you're going to want the extra regen. I was running this build with about high weapon damage. I had about 2800 to 3k weapon damage, but I had 500 regen, which is great for 1 vs 1. But 1vx situations, I've tested this build and I found that it's about 600, 700 more regen, give or take, is way more sustainable than having the higher weapon damage. It really doesn't make a difference on your damage with the procs. So now, for the 2H bar, my back bar, I have Rearming Trap. A lot of people see this ability and they rely on it, which isn't the right way to go about it. You need to put this ability down when you have a line of sight, which means if, say, targets chasing me, right behind me, I'm turning around, I'm looking at them. They're coming through this doorway right here. I'm going to throw that trap right down. I'm going to wait right here. The second they come into this choke point, they're going to get caught in that trap. You're going to hit them with an Evasion, you're going to hit them with the Viper and the Puncture. And then once it arms, you could roll back and you could cast another one. You could have up to 4 rearming traps down at once, which is very overpowered. If you look at the actual ability, that's unbuffed. If I buff up, it's a huge dot. If they don't have Purge, it's going to hurt. And it's a CC, a root, It's definitely a good ability, but just don't rely on it, because too many people, they rely on that for their build, and they're putting it down, they're paying attention too much on the trap, rather than the dots, and keeping their heals, their buffs, and pressure on their target. Shuffle. This ability is, any medium armor should use it. Any heavy armor should use it, even some light situations. It gives you a 20% dodge chance on all incoming damage. And also, the main reason I run it is because of these snares. Because when you're in heavy armor, you're very slow. And you need to cleanse the snares off you so you can move around. Venomous Claw. This is going to be weaved in with a heavy attack. You're going to do a fully charged heavy attack, and then pop your Venomous Claw. This is a very good dot. The other reason a lot of people don't know about the heavy attack for the 2H is right here, follow-up. Your successful fully charged heavy attacks increase the damage of your next attack by 10% for 7 seconds. That's very overpowered. 10% damage for 7 seconds on a heavy attack. If you weave in that heavy attack every 7 seconds, your overall damage is going to be increased by 10% on all your attacks, including your sword and board. Alright, Volatile Armor. This gives you major ward. It's just self-explanatory. You get 5,000 resistances. You could swap this out with bat wings if you feel like you have too much projectiles coming at you. And if you want to do that, you could just go to your Tri-Food and pop your Tri-Food on. And that'll give you just about 15,000 magic to play with for your bat wings. And the final is Rally. This is your major brutality, and the heal on this is just self-explanatory. I mean, you can't self-sustain with just Igneous and Vigor. You need to have the Rally on your back bar. This I had Banner on here because I had large group play, but I'm going to go ahead and put what I normally use for 1vxing, which is obviously Dawnbreaker of Smiting. This ability is just too good. This is going to be your burst, your execute. Because if you notice, I'm not running an execute on this build. You don't really need it. You're going to knock all your targets down with this ability. You're going to cause a huge dot, huge initial burst, and there's a lot of vampires out there. It's going to hit them very hard. These potions I'm running are very overpowered. They're a little pricey, but they speak for themselves, you know. The immunity to the knockbacks, the immovables. I mean, 16 seconds is just ridiculous. You know, you're pretty much untouchable for that 16 seconds. By the time it's out, you can just pop another one. The other thing is, what a lot of people don't know, is if you go into crafting and alchemy, the medical use. When using potions, resulting effects last 30% longer. You want to level alchemy to get that, because when you use a potion and you don't have that, it wears out about half the amount of time you have to wait, and you don't have the potion buff. For example, I'll pop a less expensive one. There it goes. Now, see it ticking on the bottom here? 21 seconds I have still on it. Look. All that time that I have for a cooldown, I still have my buff up. 10 seconds. 5 seconds. Alright, it's cooled off. And look at that. You get about 5 seconds of time that your potion is actually not active. Which is very overpowered. I think that's basically it. Let's go. I'll show you my champion points real quick. What we're doing in the tower is I have mostly reduction. It gives me 13% reduction on all my stamina abilities, 10% into magician for the little bit of a reduction to my magic abilities like my igneous, volatile. 47 into mooncalf. It's not a regen build, but that little bit, you know, 15% is a good amount, stacked with a werewolf. It does buff my stamina regen a little bit, which gives me more survivability with roll dodging. Alright, tumbling. In heavy armor, you don't really roll that much. I personally like to roll, so I have 46 points into that. And 13 points for 6% reduced blocking. If I have a bunch of projectiles coming at me, I need to block. That's a good thing to have. Apprentice, 30 points into healing. I like the, at least put 30, so it gives me my spell crit. 12% extra spell crit. It helps me with heals a little bit. You know what I mean? You get that extra spell crit. And also about 11% increased healing done by yourself, which is huge. 10% 10 points rather. 5% increased damage because it is a heavy attack build. I mean, a lot of people don't realize is when you have a low regen build, you have to rely on your heavy attacks to keep your stamina and other resources up. You can't just burn out all your resources if you don't have high regen. 15 of the Thermitage for the extra dot damage, basically for my Dawnbreaker, my Venomous Claw, and my Rearming Trap. 6% buff. I don't have any points in the piercing. Since they changed the piercing from numbers, from percentage to numbers, it's been much less effective. You don't need it when you have a build that has a major fracture, which causes 5,000 penetration on top of sharpened. You have 10,000 penetration right there. You're better off putting the points into precise strikes, which gives you extra damage from your crit abilities. So, for example, when your Viper and your Tremor Scale and your Ransack crits all at once, it's going to hit 12% harder, which is huge. You know, sometimes you hit a target and they drop down to about, you know, just about close to 50% execute range. You know, some like Executioner hits harder below targets with 50% HP. So, it can be the difference between you dying or not. And 97 into Mighty, which buffs all your physical poison and disease damage done. 30 into Resistant. I do the 30 because it gives me, when you roll dodge, 660 resist every time you roll dodge, which is really good. Thick Skin, 21%. I used to have 75 into Hardy and 45 about or so into Elemental Defender. But being this patch, how everyone is using the Destro ultimates and running Flame DragonKnights and whatnot, you need more Elemental Defender in your build that gives you more resistance to shock, flame, and magic damage. So 48 into Hardy, 68 into Elemental Defender, and 21 for damage over time resistance. Also 20 points into Quick Recovery. So that gives me 20 points of Quick Recovery and then 30 points into the Blessed for healing. So I got about, 50 points into my extra healing, but you need big heals because the more time that you spend on healing, the less time you're putting pressure on your opponents. So, yeah, if you're a glass cannon build, that's different. But if you're a glass cannon build and you hit somebody and you got to worry about healing constantly because the target has a little bit too much resistance, tankiness, then your build is going to be inferior. You're going to have a problem. Alright guys, if you have any questions, comment below. Me putting up some extra videos on this build, 1vxing. You guys have a good one.